I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. We have a real packed show for you tonight. Everything from an audit of the Fire Bureau that features quite a pushback from the fire chief to my opinion about the chaos on the Markham Bridge in Portland last weekend with a man in mental health crisis. But first, Oregon's legislature. They're getting close to their annual session. It's a short one this year, and one topic looms large, and that is our big story tonight. In the past few years, we've seen drug use and overdoses skyrocket in Oregon. Many people point their finger at Measure 110. Lawmakers now plan to take up the issue during the short session in early February. There are no shortage of ideas. Former state lawmaker and Republican candidate for governor Christine Drazan wrote in an op-ed in today's Oregonian, Measure 110 must be repealed, full stop. Drazan proposed her own solutions to the growing drug crisis, including discouraging drug use, prioritizing sobriety, going after drug dealers, and expanding prevention programs for kids. Drazan is just the latest to call for change. Several others, including Multnomah County's district attorney, think recriminalizing drug use in public is part of the answer. The Joint Interim Committee on Addiction and Community Safety Response is a group of bipartisan lawmakers working on the state's addiction response. And for the last several months, they've been hearing from lots of different people who work with drug users, law enforcement, jails, the courts, and people who work on the treatment side. Some of them think that there should be criminal penalties for drug use, but they all say they need more support before that can happen. Today, the committee met before the last time before the session begins. They introduced 3 legislative concepts as committee bills, basically a draft of a bill. They don't have the language of the bills ready to release yet, but we do know that they're focused on the addiction crisis, on behavioral health, and public safety. But they spent the bulk of today's meeting talking about substance use prevention. They heard from John Epstein, a teacher and parent whose son Cal died in 2020 when he took a pill that he bought off social media. That turned out to be a lethal dose of fentanyl. Today, he told lawmakers that the state has not been doing enough to prevent drug use in kids. You'll hear his voice here over a presentation given to the committee.
We have ignored prevention in this state for a decade. We've done nothing. When we went around to look for places to land a fentanyl awareness and prevention curriculum, there was nowhere to take it. Nobody stood up after the Lund report and said, oh, that's our problem, we own that, we'll fix it. Not one group stood up and said, that's our problem. Many pointed at it and said that is a problem, but there is no ownership for prevention in Oregon.
The Lund report he's referring to is a report from last March of last year that showed how state inaction left Oregon teens vulnerable to fentanyl. It detailed how youth addiction treatment programs have diminished in Oregon. You can read it now on thelundreport.com. It's definitely worth your time. Lawmakers today also heard from Alcohol Drug Policy Commission. That's a state agency that's tasked with improving the state's substance use services. They presented a 14-part list of recommendations when it comes to making changes to Measure 110. The recommendations start with prevention. They say the state needs to improve its infrastructure around drug use prevention, including having prevention coordinators in every county and tribe across the state. They say the state also needs to increase access to the medications that help people get clean, things like methadone, and increase funding for sobering centers. They say lawmakers should increase recovery housing and sober living, peer support for people with substance use disorder, and culturally specific recovery community centers. They recommend a strategy around harm reduction, things like Narcan, drug testing strips, and syringe services, and a new plan for preventing and treating drug use in kids and teens by 2025. So that's a lot. Did you catch it all? It's a tall order for a session that only lasts a few weeks, and it's a lot of moving parts across a lot of areas across a big state. Here's one idea that was floated to try and bring it all together.
Should we have a drug prevention czar who is able to have some authority and input as to every agency out there, state and local, and whose mission is to help them coordinate what they're doing as a short-term solution while we work out how we work these programs together?
Representative Mannix, an emphatic yes, 100%.
We're keeping an eye on those committee bills, and as soon as we find out what's in them, we're going to let you know. And you can bet we'll be following the issue through this short session, which starts Monday, February 5th. In the meantime, let's hear from you. What does Oregon need to do better when it comes to drug abuse prevention? Send us our thoughts, will you? The email address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 503-226-5090. And while we're on the topic of drug crisis, last week the Portland Fire Bureau announced a new pilot program for an overdose response team to help those struggling with addiction. Officials told us the hope is that it also takes some of the strain off the fire crews, so a full fire crew does not have to respond to every OD call. Last year they averaged 19 overdose calls per day across the city of Portland. So why are we telling you about that overdose response team again? Well, the city just released an audit of the Fire Bureau's community health programs, and that OD response team is part of it. And there are some interesting red flags and some political finger pointing that we think are worth highlighting. Here's the audit that you can find on the city's website. Portland Fire and Rescue Community Health Division programs need guidance and leadership to provide Portlanders with the services they need and reduce demands on firefighters. That's the title of the whole thing. Now, before we get too far into this, the field work for this particular audit ended in May of last year. The Fire Bureau says since then, some things have changed in regards to the Community Health Division, changed in a big way. Namely, it's been eliminated and absorbed by the Bureau's Medical Services and Training Division. So here's a chart to help you visualize that change. The green programs, Portland Street Response and Community Health Access and Treat, or CHAT, which is the overdose response team that's part of that, all those moved to Medical Services and Training. And the Community Connect program is gone, disappeared, no more. The purpose of the audit was to figure out if the Fire Bureau was using programs like Portland Street Response and CHAT to reduce the workload for fire crews, which are often stretched thin responding to these lower acuity calls, as they call them, lesser emergencies. An example would be someone calling 911 because they feel sick and they do not know how else to get health care. In fact, according to the audit, the Fire Bureau responds to more medical calls than fire calls. In the past 3 years, the Fire Bureau has averaged around 86,000 incidents per year, and well over half of those, 63%, were medical related. Some of the medical calls are indeed true emergencies, but some of them definitely not. This graph shows the latest data that tracks those 911 calls that are considered non-emergency. In 2020 to 2021, almost 1 in every 3 calls for service ended up being non-emergency. And getting a full fire crew of 4 people and often a big old fire truck to those scenes is both time-consuming, expensive, and also takes crews away from the true emergencies. Let's get into some of the big issues the audit found. First, the Fire Bureau did not establish clear goals for Community Health Division and had no plan to meet goals because, well, they didn't exist. The Bureau did not measure performance equally between Portland Street Response and CHAT, basically using different yardsticks to measure the success, and overall did not measure whether the programs eased the workload of the firefighters. And finally, the Bureau's, quote, inconsistent commitment to Community Health Division magnified shortcomings and contributed to an uncertain future. And as with any audit, there's a list of recommendations to try to solve some of those big issues. First, the auditors say fire should clarify to Bureau employees and the public how committed the Fire Bureau is to operating Portland Street Response and CHAT. If the Bureau does not want to be involved with Street Response or CHAT, then allow City Council to find the right fit. Next, set clear goals. Then, create a plan to meet those goals. Makes sense. Measure the progress towards the outcomes and develop a process to be able to continuously review that progress to make adjustments if needed. All right, that all seems really pretty self-explanatory, right? And if you've lived in Portland for more than 6 months, you probably know it's never that easy. Remember the purpose of the audit? To determine if Portland Street Response and CHAT crews were helping reduce the workloads of those fire crews? Well, according to Portland Fire Chief Ryan Gillespie, that was never and is not now a goal for either program at all. Yeah, we agree this got kind of weird pretty fast. Auditors say that documents that they reviewed showed the programs indeed had a goal of being patient-centered and reducing the low acuity calls for firefighters. So reducing that workload. Gillespie says, nope, Absolutely not. In a 5-page response to the audit, Gillespie says the goal of Portland Street Response is to respond to behavioral incidents, while the chat crews are responsible for medical calls. Gillespie puts the onus on Portland Street Response on the Police Bureau, claiming that 98.5% of Portland Street Response responses are for calls that would normally go to police, not fire. And he's not shy in saying that the City Council is the entity that needs to make decisions for street response, writing, "We are looking for City Council's guidance regarding goal refinement for PSR, as this was a program established at the council level." Basically saying, this is not my thing, not my problem. As you will likely remember, the person who brought the street response to life was former Commissioner Joanne Hardesty, who did not want the Police Bureau to be involved with that. That's why it got put under the Fire Bureau. It seems to us, at least, that Gillespie thinks the program would be better served somewhere other than the Fire Bureau. The only nugget in his response that shows otherwise is that the Bureau has hired a community health policy analyst to develop policy and funding plan for street response. Chat, on the other hand, was created by Portland Fire and Rescue in partnership with Care Oregon. But as far as chat being used to reduce workloads for his fire crews, Gillespie wrote, "A common denominator between PSR and chat is that neither program was designed to reduce firefighter workload. While chat does provide frontline crews with some relief from lower acuity medical calls, this is an added benefit of our relationship with Care Oregon, not a chat program goal or performance metric of our agreement." So yeah, not a goal, he says, but a benefit on the side. So the audit that took city workers months to complete, well, seems a little useless, at least from the perspective of the fire chief. Many of you may be wondering how Commissioner Rene Gonzalez feels about all this, since he now oversees that Fire Bureau. In his own response to the audit, Gonzalez writes, "The need to ensure these programs are structurally sound, grounded in articulatable, actionable goals, and financially cost-effective can no longer be ignored. I am committed to these programs' long-term success and have full confidence in both Bureau and program leadership to guide us there. Your audit serves as an important reminder that sometimes we need to slow down to speed up." So Gonzalez is committed to the long-term success of Portland Street Response, while his own fire chief seems like he can't wait to make it someone else's responsibility. That's our take on it, at least. We would love to hear your thoughts. Remember, the audit and responses from Gillespie and Gonzalez are available now on the city's website. Give it a look. Let us know if you think we're full of it. We don't think we are. Email the story at kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Coming up next on The Story, Northeast 33rd Drive in Portland is a notorious spot for RVs and homeless camps. But after weeks of preparation, the city began clearing the area, and they have a simple strategy that they hope will keep the road clear. Their best went out there today to check on the progress and what's being done for folks who've lived along that stretch for years. When The Story returns. One of Portland's largest homeless camps on Northeast 33rd Drive is being cleared this week. Our cameras were there both yesterday and today. It's a massive effort from the Bureau of Transportation and other city departments that took weeks of preparation and will likely take many more days to clean up. So far, they've towed nearly 40 vehicles, but as Blair Best reports, many avoided the tow trucks by setting up camp just 3 streets away.
To some, it's the sound of progress. To others,
I think it's sad, and I think it wasn't right.
it's the sound of loss.
A family, a friend, everything. It's a lot. I'm sorry.
This is what's left of a large homeless camp along Northeast 33rd Drive. To people like Liz, it was more than just a place to stay.
Everybody knew everybody, and everybody helped everybody.
For weeks, the city of Portland has been preparing to remove the site, where people have lived in rundown vehicles for years.
And I know it looks like garbage to some people, but to them, that's all they got.
In the past year, the city did 11 smaller, more focused removals along the street. But this week, everything was cleared.
A lot of people lost their homes, and it's
Tim Coates lost 8 vehicles. He had pointed them out to us one morning last March.
I own that gray van right there. I own, this is gonna be my truck and my trailer. That van's mine. That Nissan 4x4 is mine. The motorhome's mine. The 2 vans in front of mine, and the motorhome across the street is mine.
This week, he admits the site got out of control.
Half of the blame is theirs, because you can't leave a message and expect to not be kicked out.
The city told KGW they did not have the capacity for an interview at this time, but said in an email 39 vehicles were towed as of Monday. They said this camp removal is larger in scope than is typical and required lots of coordination between different bureaus. So it will take several days. Outreach workers have referred 26 people to a shelter. James Michael Rose was one of them.
They sent me to Tiny Village. They actually called down there and got me set up that I was approved before I went down there. So I feel pretty, lucky that I had somewhere to go to.
That wasn't the case for everyone.
They offered me a tiny home. That was 3 days before they told us, and they never got back to me.
So turns out during the sweep, many people just moved their RVs about a half-mile away to this spot on Argyle Street.
There's not really a plan. We're on the run again from Peabody. Like being hunted? Yeah, it's exactly like being hunted.
Leaving some determined to survive on their own.
And I've never asked for no help, and I'm not gonna ask for help. I'm tougher than I can live with this.
Now, once this is all cleared, and again, this is scheduled to last several more days, PBOT and the Port of Portland plan on posting no parking signs. They hope that will be enough to prevent future vehicle buildup. Seen as a no parking sign legally allows PBOT to tow vehicles much faster without giving as much advance notice. In Northeast Portland, Blair Best, KGW News.
Thanks, Blair. And before Blair left today, she met this man who said that outreach workers never followed up with him after offering him a spot in a tiny home, and he wasn't sure what to do. So Blair walked him out to the outreach workers that were there today. Turns out they did remember him, and they told him he told them he was ready to take them up on the offer for shelter, and they started the referral process. The city tells Blair outreach workers will be at the site all week. Coming up on the story, some of you may have been caught up in the traffic backups near the Markham Bridge this past weekend. The road was shut down for 10 hours as a man was experiencing a mental health crisis. But at the end of it all, police let him walk away. I'll give you the facts and then I'll share my opinion on that when the story returns. Let's take a moment now to talk about something involving mental health that happened last weekend on the Markham Bridge and took 10 hours to resolve. Something that tied up traffic for thousands, if not tens of thousands of drivers. And once again, in my opinion, exposed the awful state that we're in when it comes to mental illness and the ability to step in when someone is dangerous to themselves or others. All right, first, the facts. According to Portland police, on Saturday, January 6th, around 2 p.m., a man was spotted walking up the southbound ramp of I-405 to northbound I-5. It's kind of confusing to visualize, so I've circled the spot there and put an X near where the man was found. Police say he had climbed over a chain link fence onto the outside and was in danger of jumping down onto Southwest Moody Avenue, roughly 130 feet below. This is a photo Portland police released from the incident. Police say they could tell the man was having a mental health crisis, so they called in their enhanced crisis intervention team. Portland Fire and Rescue and the ambulance company AMR also responded to help out. Now, because of the location, police stopped traffic in several places, some for as long as 10 hours. That involved the Oregon Department of Transportation and OHSU Police Department, so a lot of folks involved. Then police brought in their top negotiators to try and convince the man to come in off the outside of the fence. But after 8 hours and 3 negotiators, they decided the best course of action was to monitor the man from a distance. So they all backed off. And after 2 hours, the man walked off the bridge. Police told me this afternoon they had identified the man during those 10 hours, and as time went on, they started to believe he was no longer in a mental health crisis. Finally, they said one of the man's biggest fears was that police would swoop in and arrest him as soon as he left the bridge and cause him pain. So they promised him they would not do that, and they wanted to keep that promise. So he was allowed to walk away. Police told me they are following up with service providers, and they do hope the man gets the help that he needs, and that since he had not committed any crimes, he was indeed to go free. So those are the facts. Now, my opinion. Are you kidding me? What does it take to get someone help in this city? You'll hear that the bar for detaining someone against their will is pretty high, and it is. But come on. In my opinion, this guy high jumped over that bar with no problem. The standard for taking someone into custody is this: are they a danger to themselves or to others? So let's think about that. Let's walk this through. Is a man who walks up the Markham Bridge, a place with no sidewalk and cars and trucks flying by at 60 miles an hour or more, is he a danger to himself or others? Well, of course he is, both to himself and to all those drivers. And what about hanging onto the outside of a cyclone fence for hours threatening to jump? Does that make him a threat to himself or others? Absolutely. So why in the world would he be allowed to walk off the bridge and disappear at the end of it all? I don't mean to criticize the work of Portland police negotiators. After all, their job is to keep the guy alive if possible, and they did that. Well done. But why was he not taken into custody or for treatment after he got off the bridge? And what if he'd walked back up onto the bridge? I understand a lot of people in this town think the right of individuals are so important that the rights of the general public can be put on hold. In this case, I got to disagree. That person's actions show that he was in crisis and in need of professional help. I'm worried that we as a community have fostered such a hands-off attitude that we're afraid to do anything. And in keeping our collective hands off this individual, I think we allowed him to continue to put himself and others in risk. I'm very thankful that he did not jump or fall off the bridge and that nothing else has happened with this person as far as we know. And like you, I hope that he does get the help that he needs. But in my opinion, this is a glaring example of the dysfunction within our system, and it's certainly not helping the individual. Caring sometimes means taking action. And in my opinion, that should have happened in this case. That is my opinion. What's yours? Were you caught up in the traffic jam over the weekend? Are you concerned like me that the community is too hands off and he was just let go free? If you want to disagree, that's fine. Please do communicate with us. We're one of the only shows, probably the only show in the nation that I know on TV, local TV, where you can give feedback, and we use your feedback to generate more conversations and deep thought and to keep the conversation going. So email us, thestory@kgw.com. Call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. We'd love to know what you think about that, and I look forward to hearing from you. By the way, if you or someone you know is having suicidal thoughts or is in mental health related stress, there are people who will help. There's a phone number that you can call or text, and it's all free. The number is 988. Write that down, 988. All right. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our collective story, that never ends. The good stuff is coming your way next, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.